Welcome to BFC Live, the daily video and podcast series of Business of Cannabis. BFC Live highlights the companies, brands, people, and trends driving the global cannabis sector. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com. Coming up on BFC Live, we connect with David Wasserman of CannDelta. He's going to talk about how to choose cannabis retail locations amidst increased competition, especially in Ontario, where the density in some neighborhoods is hard to miss. David Wasserman from CannDelta, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I enjoy having you. At least I have enjoyed having you. I think I will again. But always enjoy the CannDelta team coming on based on sort of the insight, the depth of knowledge, the real-time sort of experience of what's happening on the ground. And today, I wanted to see if I could pick your brain, get your expertise, have you share about something that is on everybody's mind, at least if they're in downtown Toronto, and that is about retail and cannabis retail density and location. Are you ready for that?
Definitely.
Because it's funny, someone did a count up, like there were 25 stores, then there were like 200, and that kind of seemed a lot, and that was like nothing because should be passing 1,000 in Ontario alone soon, right?
Yeah, well, every quarter it seems to almost be doubling, like about a 40% increase. So yeah, we're almost at capacity, but there still is some room. You just have to be a little smart about where you're picking.
Well, that's actually the question is like, at least where I live, but I live in downtown Toronto, like, all the great corners, all the great sort of mid-block stuff, not all the great, but many of them have been either scooped up or seem to be scooped up, but there's got to be other places to locate cannabis stores. Tell me I'm wrong or tell me I'm right, I guess.
No, 100%. Like if you only look at downtown Toronto, you wouldn't believe that we're not at capacity yet because, compared to some of the other regions, it's just super oversaturated there. But yeah, again, all the easy places or most of the easy places, the obvious ones, they have been snatched up pretty quickly, but there's still lots out there.
Can you give me a refresher? Because we've actually been talking to some folks in BC at a recent event that we did, and they have different rules, and Saskatchewan too, municipalities have tons of power. Tell me about like what the restrictions are for locations. I mean, the obvious ones like near schools, but like what rules do municipalities have or influence do they have in cities to actually locate these things?
Right. So let me just start with BC a little bit. So there, each municipality is a little bit different, but in Vancouver, for example, cannabis retail stores can't be within 300 meters of each other.
Right.
In Ontario, there is no such rule.
Yeah, if there were, there'd be so few in downtown Toronto.
Exactly. So here, there's kind of two main rules. One, the municipality has to not have opted out. So in January 22nd, 2019 was the deadline that Ontario municipalities had to say, you know what, we're going to opt out of cannabis retail stores. They were always allowed to opt back in. They still can opt back in whenever they like.
Will you
once you're
send that note to Mississauga?
Yeah, no, for sure. Again, they had that vote not that long ago. But the big thing is once you're in, and you can't take it back.
Right. That at least, I was listening in, I was watching people tweet. That seemed to be their challenge, that they really had no control once they opted in. And if I was a municipality or sitting on a city council, between opting out completely or like opting in and have it be swamped, like I think that's a ridiculous decision, but I can understand it from elected officials' perspective. But let's not go there. Let's not talk Mississauga politics. So once in Ontario, at least, once a municipality says yes, then I guess there's two things. One, it needs to be, I don't know, some distance from some like schools, and then be zoned properly. Like what are the rules around that?
Right. So in Ontario, basically the municipality has to not have opted out. So you didn't have to opt in. If you gave no answer, you're in.
Right.
The big one though is schools. So you just have to be 150 meters away from any public school or any private school.
That sounds simple, but but I know it's not, because there's been a couple issues about the measurement and how the AGCO measures. And to my mind, it would make sense, like not as the crow flies, but as someone would walk 150 meters front door to front door. But I have a feeling that that is not the case. Is that the case?
No, not at all. It is much more complicated. Yeah.
Of course it is.
So the big thing is, firstly, what is a school?
Right.
So a lot of these private schools that pop up here or there, they're not always on the map, and they could change location very quickly. It's just a form essentially that they need to submit to the Ministry of Education, and it's a brand new school, brand new location.
Right. And it could come in the process.
So the criteria basically comes from the Education Act, and it just says it needs to be operating at some point between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. It has to have at least five students between the age of 16 to 18, compulsory school age, and it has to teach the subjects that are in elementary or secondary school.
Yeah, so it's actually a pretty broad definition, as long as you register with the Ministry of Education, and there'd really be no way of knowing if you're a retailer setting up shop, that maybe at some point between when you sign a lease and get licensed, that a school registers or moves or adds a wing or whatever it is.
Right.
That's challenging. I know that has happened as well. At least we've heard what's happening. But tell me about the measurement from. It's not door. Is it door to door?
No. So that's a little bit complicated too. So if it's the primary occupant or the only occupant of the building, then it's 150 meters from the property line of the school to basically the property line of the retail store. In most cases, the retail store is not the entire building, or in some private schools, that could be in a plaza or could be part of a building. They're not the entire building. So it's the space within the building that's occupied by the store or the school. The closest corners you have to measure from there.
Oh, so it gets closer, actually, not further away. Door to door might actually be further away than corner to corner or lot line to lot line. Okay.
Exactly. And one issue, so people may go online, and the AGCO, within their application tool for your RSA, your retail store authorization, it has a built-in check just to see if you're within 150 meters of a school, but it's not always accurate. So it kind of measures from centroid to centroid, so the center of the school to the center of the retail store.
But you just said that may not be, that actually may be, that may be 151 meters, but when you do it from the, I see. Okay,
Right.
Well, that's a very expensive mistake or challenge, and a mistake is maybe accusing blame, but it may not be anybody to blame. It's just that's where they measure from. And I guess and I'm not trying to put you on the spot. They're regulators that you have to deal with, but like, has the AGCO been clear about that, or is that something that's been clarified over time?
They've been pretty clear. So on the application itself, it says the onus is on you. You need to ensure that you're not within 150 meters. And just because the application was accepted and it didn't give you an error, doesn't mean that it'll pass for sure.
So you have a good lens of what's happening in the realm, and let's stick to Ontario, because that's at least what we're hearing the most. Well, we heard Mississauga complain about possible clustering, but we also know in downtown Toronto, there's lots of clustering. Like, are there areas in the bigger cities and towns in Ontario where there is clustering that's clear, and other places that seem to be more spaced out, either because happenstance or lack of real estate or better operators? Like, what are you seeing out there?
Right. So yeah, clustering does happen, and it is happening because the places that are the busiest, everyone jumps in at the same time, and you want to be where the customers are.
Yeah, it's like a diversion of like, why would you rob a bank? It's because that's where the money is. Why would you put a cannabis store there? It's because that's where the people who like cannabis are, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like, if you look at a map of Toronto, you could see that, especially downtown, that's where all the clustering happens. As you move farther north, farther west, away from the core, it's more spread out, and there's more and more spaces.
Speaking of more and more spaces, I want to go back to Vancouver for a second, because this is, look, Vancouver and cannabis go hand in hand. That's part of their history. And in their wisdom, or lack of wisdom, I guess, depending on your perspective, they have drawn a 300-meter circle around each cannabis retail store to give like a 300-meter circular monopoly, really, to that licensee. I think it's probably great for that licensee. Like, it's impossible to do in hindsight, sort of, in Ontario, but like, would cities have been, if they were allowed, like in BC, like, does that create a better environment for cannabis retailers in your perspective, or is it like, now, the Lord of the Flies that we have in Ontario is sort of a better model for the market?
Personally, I say let the free market decide. Even if you have a radius of 300 meters, you can't open up next to another cannabis store. 300 meters still isn't that far.
Yeah.
So you could still have clustering. It would be a little bit more spread out, but you'd still have concentrated areas.
Yeah. You certainly can. I mean, you even look at, yes. I mean, it'd be interesting to see sort of how far the average is in downtown Toronto, one from another. But my guess is it's actually less than 300 meters, just based on sort of a drive down Bloor Street or Queen Street or Yonge Street. It is interesting. Is there an ideal? I guess this is the other question. You can look at more mature markets, or even in Ontario or throughout Canada. Like, is there a like equilibrium number that's like population to cannabis store, or does it really depend on, like, who works in that area? In some case, eventually we'll have like travel and tourism. Like, is there a perfect ratio, or like, we don't even know yet in Canada?
People have given estimates, but the truth is it really depends on the demographics and, on cannabis users. You can have a very densely populated area, but if people don't smoke cannabis there for cultural reasons, or age reasons, or a variety of other reasons, you won't be doing good business there. There could also be a place that doesn't look very busy, like a tourist town, for example. But those could be great because maybe a couple months a year or during the on season. But if you just looked at the demographics and just at the population density, it doesn't always give you the full story.
Yeah, it's interesting because in my neighborhood, on the Facebook group, there's lots of concern, and people are up in arms that there's, I think, 5 and soon to be 6 cannabis stores, really in a pretty tight cluster. And then someone chimed in on the Facebook group. Nobody ever has said the same thing about the 10 restaurants that have liquor licenses literally on the same block right next to each other, including some that have now become bottle shops because they were closed down as restaurants. Like, it is interesting from a cultural, sociological perspective, the difference between how people are looking at cannabis store, which you can't go in if you're not, under 19. You can't really see into them. Yes, they have cannabis inside, but you can't smell it, can't see it, versus a bar, which is basically wide open, or a bottle shop, which anybody can walk into.
Right. And people ask me all the time, how come a bar you can walk in without even being ID'd? It's only when you try to buy a drink often that they'll card you. Cannabis store, according to the regulations, as soon as you walk in the door, before they let you into the store itself, you need to be ID'd and age gated.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question, because you CannDelta, and you, David, must have people come to you, say, we want to open a store, but we think it's too dense. Like, what do you don't have to tell us the free, you don't have to tell the expensive advice you're giving, but tell us about the advice you're giving, and sort of your thoughts about, like, if you were a would-be retailer or wannabe retailer, and you think things are too clustered or dense, like, what are you saying to that when people are coming to you with that request?
Well, so you can stick it out. If you think you're going to do a good job and you're going to be the best, then competition isn't that bad. If you look at the car dealerships, they always cluster. Right. When you want to buy a car, you go to this area and you have all your options. There, at least, you have different varieties, different choices. You go to Buick, or you go to GMC, versus you go to Audi. You're getting a different type of car. Here, more or less, every store is selling the same products, at least as far as cannabis goes. So you can make it in clustering. There's lots of people that do great, especially, Queen Street, you may look at it and say, hey, how does anyone do business here? But, COVID aside, Queen Street's super busy. And when the tourists come back and all of that, you're going to have lots of customers around there anyways.
Yeah. And I mean, one other difference between, say, a car dealership and even a bar, there's no Ontario car dealership store like that can sell things for just as expensive as you. Like all those things, I think are worthy of conversation. Obviously, not in this context, but it is interesting. Like there are some certain parallels, and then there are some things that are clearly net different. But I really appreciate the time, because I think it is a thing people are talking about as they walk down the street, like this clustering, but also, you talked about the benefits of clustering and that it may actually provide consumer choice. And some places, if they're super dense or super trafficked for tourism or otherwise, it could be a really good area. Likewise, I would imagine, actually, I want to ask you this, like, have you seen like scenarios, and I've seen them sort of in the sort of suburbs and exurbs of Toronto, that some of those stores are just going gangbusters, that are in those plazas, they're the only ones there, there's parking, and really the only store for, a couple kilometers or tens of kilometers. And that seems to be a really juicy location for stores.
No, for sure. Again, if you're the only one around, people are going to come.
Yeah. Even if the municipality is like cringing about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, most downtown. So even if you look at Guelph or Kitchener, and of course, Toronto, you get lots of clustering around the core. But as you move out to the suburbs, things are a little bit more spread out. So like Sarnia, for example, if you were to look at the map and, just see where all the cannabis retail stores are, it's pretty spread out there. Like they actually have a pretty good distribution.
Yeah, not downtown Toronto. Although,
no.
I guess if you looked at the whole map of Toronto and they were clustered sort of in the downtown core, which we have, thank you. We'll show that as well. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your insight, expertise, and actually broader knowledge than just my block, because sometimes we're so myopic, like, oh, this must be like it is everywhere, and it most certainly is not.
Right.
It's just
I'm in Vaughan, so we got nothing here.
Yeah, you get nothing. You still have to drive, and don't go to Mississauga, because then you're doubly bare there on terms of the cannabis stores. But I do think, and actually, sorry, I don't mean to, I want to let you go, but this is one of the things that I think is interesting in the Vaughns, in the Mississaugas. Some of the juiciest stores are like right on the border where there's no cannabis stores, right? Like
exactly. So going forward, again, there are locations, but you have to kind of be smart about it. So if you're to look at maps of basically which municipalities are in and which ones are out, I have a map over here of Shelbourne and Orangeville, for example. They're surrounded by areas where the municipalities have opted out.
Yeah.
So those stores are doing pretty well because you basically capture all the business from around.
Plus, I got a good name for the store in Orangeville.
Oh yeah,
Greenville.
Oh.
Greenville and Orangeville. It's perfect. It's kind of perfect.
Yeah.
I'm gonna trademark that at this very second. I'm gonna greenvilleorangeville.com.
Greenville.
David, you're registering the domain name right now?
No, you can have that one.
Thank you. We'll head out there together and scout some malls. David, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and thank you for the visuals as well. We like looking at that and sort of understanding from a bird's eye perspective exactly what's happening too. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Nice talking to you.
That was David Wasserman of CannDelta. If you like this program, please rate and review us on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever you heard the show. It helps support the work we do. We're able to do what we do because of our ongoing partners, including Alterna Savings, Cannabis at Work, Cannabis Benchmarks, CannDelta, Gallagher, Headset, and Torque & Mains. Find out all that we do at businessofcannabis.com.